This week on the Slaptail Squad, the Beaveman is introducing a new segment. Who knows? Maybe this will be an all-new podcast, or maybe it's just a segment. We shall find out. And I like to call it Sick, Definitely, Dead, Possibly. So be prepared to laugh and be grossed out, because that's what we do. Because this is the Slaptail Squad. So let's get slapping.
Slaptail Squad, assemble.
If you're listening to this, you are a member of the great Slaptail Nation, my nation. And who am I? Well, I'm the Beaveman, master of the universe, creator of all things great and small, and Lord High Commander of the great Slaptail Nation Army. And with me today is my number 3, the Swan. Say hello, Swan.
Hello, Swan. That's kind of harsh, I just want to say.
Which number would
I
you
can't
prefer
help
to be?
it that you're number 2 stepped in poo and sucks. Something that rhymes with 2.
Okay, fascinating. Great story.
No problem.
As you have pointed out, the number 2 is not here because apparently he can't respond to a text message. But stepping in today to help us out as friend of the show, Skylar. Greetings, Skylar.
Hello, happy to be here. Happy to step in and fill the small shoes.
Smell of the shoes that he doesn't
And the
even know the
cucumber.
size. Doesn't even know the size of his shoe, unfortunately.
Nope, he doesn't.
All right, sit back and relax and be prepared to have a wonderful story brought to you today. And probably some interesting pictures as I share my screen with you eventually, but not right now, eventually. I would like to say that today our resources for this episode are the CDC website, Medscape, YouTube, of course, Wikipedia, and UpToDate. All right, here we go. At long last, the pandemic is over. Despite a rocky and devastatingly deadly start, the world united, and one brilliant woman stepped forward with an effective plan that eradicated the virus. Of course, wishful thinking on my part. This never happened. The world rejoiced, the economy rebounded, and finally, all was right in the world. Somewhere across the world, in Morocco, a potato farmer gazed at his field. He looked about to the left and right, and there was a slight rumbling in his tummy. And so without hesitation, he dropped trowel, and he dropped a steaming loaf of poo in his field.
Gross.
Well, I mean, it's really not an issue because there are many developing nations that use poop, human feces, for fertilizer in their fields. So it's not an uncommon practice there in Morocco.
Okay.
And so his poop really just added to the rest. Now fade out from that scene. And now fade into a new scene. This is Marrakesh, a city in Morocco. It's a beautiful city. You've dreamed of going there your entire life. I don't know why. I just picked that one. I thought Marrakesh would be cool. So you've been staying in the city center. You're enjoying the shopping and the bustling of the crowd during the day and the exciting nightlife in the evening. And today, you decided to have some local cuisine to include Moroccan spiced potatoes. I think it's funny that they're spiced potatoes because in the back of my mind, if
You're spiced with poo.
they're spiced with poo. All right. After a wonderful vacation of a lifetime, you head back to the real world. Memories that will last forever. Souvenirs for your loving family. Pictures to share. And stowaways that will rear their ugly heads in the near future. So, after about 2 weeks of being home, you start to notice that you've got a little bit of a cough. No big deal. Probably just a minor cold. It happens after travel. But because COVID-19 has been eradicated, you know that can't possibly be the cause. Just a little cough, medicine, and all will be right with the world. But the cough persists. It goes on for a little while, and eventually there's some wheezing, some shortness of breath, still pretty minor. And occasionally you get a slight fever. So you go off to see your doctor, and as expected, because he's a doctor, and because this is the United States, he gives you a Z-Pack of antibiotics, which is azithromycin. Symptoms are mild and seem to get better, and they would have gotten better anyway, regardless of the antibiotic.
Stop it. That antibiotic totally fixed him.
Oh, it totally fixed it. It's just coincidental that it went away at just about the same time. Anyway, you don't give it a second thought. I mean, it only lasted about 10 days from start to finish, so no, it's fine. But about 3 to 4 weeks later, you start developing some tummy troubles. Sometimes you see some bloating in your abdomen, your belly. Maybe you get some nausea, that feeling you get when you want to throw up. And occasionally some loose poos, also known as diarrhea.
The Hershey squirts.
Yes. And this continues for a couple weeks. And since the diarrhea is not frequent, you don't bother to go see the doctor. You pop some Tums, start taking some medication for heartburn, like Prilosec or Pepcid or Zantac or something like that.
Some Tums.
Yeah, I said Tums.
Oh,
It was actually the first thing I said.
I wasn't paying attention.
What I actually said was
I
you
was
pop some Tums.
thinking about how you were shorting yourself.
What I actually said was you pop some Tums.
Oh, I was thinking about shorting. So.
Okay. All right. Well, eventually you go see your doctor, and he tests you for an organism called Helicobacter pylori, which is a common cause of heartburn symptoms or gastric ulcers. The test comes back negative. In other words, you don't have H. pylori. And you figure it's no big deal, so you just take the occasional Tums, and you don't bother to follow up with your doctor, even though they said come back in if you continue to have problems. You decided not to. No biggie.
Probably like most of the world.
Yeah, like most of the world. Or actually, or some people who just come, or some people who go to the doctor for no particular reason all the time.
Yeah.
You're just not one of those people.
Okay.
2 years pass, and you're now 45, and your doctor, who's not seen you for 2 years, recommends you get a colonoscopy because your symptoms are still present.
I don't want a colonoscopy.
Well, he recommends you get one.
Okay.
So you do your prep, you get your colonoscopy, and then upon awakening from your colonoscopy procedure, the doctor tells you to brace yourself. Now, of course, when a doctor says that after a colonoscopy, you're scared that you have cancer. You're afraid he's going to tell you you got cancer. Instead, he shows you a specimen jar with what looks like several large worms.
Ugh.
This was in your colon, he tells you. You gag, and because you prepped for the colonoscopy and have nothing in your stomach, you proceed to dry heave instead of throw up.
Thank you, colon prep.
Thank you, colon prep. So you're probably wondering what exactly was it that was in this man's colon? And I'm going to tell you. What I'm actually going to do is I'm going to share a screen with my folks here. Yes, screen sharing. Screen sharing. Share. You probably wonder what was that? What could have been in the stomach? Well, the roundworm, also known as Ascaris lumbricoides, the adult worm. Just so you know, and just like most things in nature, in this case, the female is the dominant and can grow to be much larger than the male. Are you able to see my screen?
We can see your screen. It looks like bean sprouts. It's nasty.
I think that's just because it's discolored. I think that they're usually like whitish pink. They're not usually a tint of green.
Ugh.
What do you think about that, there, the boy?
It just reminds me of the show that I used to really like that I doubt they're making any more Monster Inside Me.
Oh, it's a great show. But no, I don't think they have that on anymore. I wish they did.
Yeah, I can't imagine they did, but like it would always make you afraid of like going outside barefoot because something can go up your foot, or like just going outside and breathing because anything can just hop inside your body whenever it wants.
Basically, that's actually true. Many things can happen. That's why I tell people not to go outside barefoot. And when people tell me they walk around barefoot all the time, I'm like, ugh.
Don't go outside naked because it's gonna hop inside your pee hole.
Well, stuff can swim inside your pee hole when you go in lakes and oceans and all that fun stuff.
Yeah, that's gross.
Yeah.
No.
So Ascariasis is the most common helminthic infection, meaning parasitic worms. With an estimated, get this, with an estimated prevalence worldwide of 807 million to 1.2 billion people infected.
That's disgusting.
Wow.
Well, I mean, probably lots of underdeveloped countries have it as a common thing, right?
Sure. Yeah, underdeveloped. I mean, they do have, it is here in the United States. It's just not as common as some of the other worms that we have in the United States. But like in the South, the more temperate areas of the South, you can still get it. It's just not as common.
Note to self, not going to the south.
Note to self.
Note to self.
It's caused by Ascaris lumbricoides, which is the largest parasite from the class of nematodes commonly known as roundworms. And usually Ascaris lumbricoides or Ascaris sum, which you can get from pigs, that infection is typically asymptomatic. And it's most prevalent in children of tropical and developing countries where they are perpetuated by contamination of soil by human feces or use of untreated feces as fertilizer, and the water or food is contaminated by the eggs. So basically, if you're a child playing in soil and you stick your hands in your mouth, because that's what they all do,
You get worms.
you're going to get some worms. Play and poo, touch your face, put your hands in your mouth. The little kids do that. They eat dirt. Actually, I can remember eating dirt as a child.
Why? I don't
don't know.
I don't think I ever
What
ate
does children
dirt.
do? They do weird shit like
Okay,
that.
I never ate dirt.
You probably did.
I made my sister smoke leaves.
You just didn't share it. You probably did
No,
eat dirt.
I did not eat
Probably a
dirt.
dirt eater.
Nope.
Don't lie.
No, my sister ate cigarette butts too.
Why?
I'm sure she probably, I don't know, she thought it was cool. I don't know.
She thought it was cool to eat cigarette
Yeah,
butts.
she used to eat cigarette butts. It was so nasty.
Doesn't make any sense.
Don't know. I don't know why.
All right.
What's
Well,
wrong with her?
symptomatic ascariasis occurs during the adult worm's intestinal or larval migration phase and may manifest as growth retardation, pneumonitis, intestinal obstruction, or hepatobiliary and pancreatic injury. What that means is
That shit fucks you up.
it can. Basically, if you've got too many worms growing in there, it's a lot harder for you to absorb nutrients because they're taking up space.
They're getting your nutrients.
You know, they're in the small intestine where we absorb the majority of, that's where we absorb our nutrients, not in the large intestine. If you get too many of them, then it's going to block you up or bowel you up, and then you can get an intestinal obstruction. And what I mean, what it's by saying by hepatobiliary, that's just a fancy word for the liver. And pancreatic injury. You know, there's some areas of the liver and pancreas and gallbladder that are all fairly interconnected, and that worm could just swim right up in there and get plugged up in that spot.
Oh, I feel like I've been having some gallbladder pain lately. Do you think I have worms?
You might. Have you been anywhere endemic to have worms?
I don't think so.
Oh,
Does,
well,
does the desert have worms?
does the desert have? Yeah, sure. Why
So
not?
maybe I
We
got
got sandworms. Haven't you
maybe
seen
I
Dune?
got worms from
You've
the
seen Dune?
desert from my trip.
Have you
I
seen
got
Dune?
worms. No, I haven't seen it. But I've seen Beetlejuice. They have worms there too.
Yeah.
The big,
Well, so how do you get it? You might be asking yourself.
yes. How do I get it?
It all comes back to poop.
Mm-mm.
So much like the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, I can typically relate most occurrences in the world back to poop, 6 degrees or less.
Okay.
So you've got infected people who already have ascaris. They shit. Maybe they shit outside. I've been known to poop outside. I enjoy pooping outside, but I know I don't have any worms inside me.
How do you know?
I just do.
Do you check your poop?
I do.
You do?
Actually, you should check your poop. If you don't check your poop, you're missing out on some very important health signs.
Do you think that they come out if you wipe on the toilet paper? You see worms.
I think they're bigger than that. You're thinking of like pinworms.
Okay.
Roundworms are the tiny ones. This is a good sized worm.
Like how long? Inches?
How long can it get?
Yeah.
The female can get it from 7 to 13 inches, and the male can get up to
That's
5
like a
to 12
freaking
inches.
piece of spaghetti.
But it's big around too. So it's not just it's not long and thin, and it's tapered at both ends, which is really disgusting.
Ew.
It's a little pointy at both ends. Anyway, so an infected person with ascaris in the gut takes a shit outside, or they're in the country that uses human feces for fertilizer, in which case there's a lot of human shit, you know, lots of infected persons. Like I said, 1.2 million people, right? If they're using human feces for fertilizer, that's all
Chances
going
are
on the
there's
crops.
some worms in that shit.
Chances are, well, it's not the worms that are
Okay,
in
the
you know.
eggs.
Wait, yeah, so basically it's the eggs.
Okay.
So the eggs and the shit get deposited in the soil, and that's how they mature. So here's the really scary thing. It only takes 5 to 10 days for the eggs to become mature or viable,
Okay.
but they can remain infectious for up to 10 years. So in a sample of soil, they can be infectious eggs there that have been there for freaking 5, 6, 7, 8 years.
So they're still in egg form for
Yes.
5, and how
Yep.
they sit in egg form for 10 years.
Yep.
And then
Yes.
what
And
happens?
these are microscopic eggs. It's not like you're seeing a dozen eggs hanging out in the dirt.
Right.
You can't see them. There are no see-ums.
Okay. So, yeah, they're hanging out. And what makes them hatch?
I'll probably get to that.
Okay. Well, I'm just asking.
So your question is, how does it get to us after the soil?
Yeah. You
Well,
put
you
your
gotta
fingers
eat
in
it.
your mouth.
Yeah, you put your fingers in your mouth
You eat those unwashed strawberries.
or the unwashed potatoes,
Okay. Yeah, I always wash my potatoes and my strawberries. Just note to self.
something unwashed, and so then you ingest these eggs. Now here's where it gets a little bit more disgusting.
Okay.
Oh, by the way, the term used for fertilization with human feces actually has a pretty cool name. It's called night soil. I'm like, why? They named it something super cool. Let's name it night soil. It's pretty badass.
It's just human shit.
It's human
Dirt.
shit, but let's call it
Human
night
shit
soil.
dirt.
It's kind of like what do they call the water in the shit water on an RV? It's called like gray water.
Ew.
Yeah, gray water.
It's called gray water. Let's give everything cool names when it's just basically liquid shit. So you ingest the eggs. So obviously not all eggs are capable of hatching. They have to be fertilized eggs. So there's eggs that are fertilized, eggs that are not fertilized. Obviously you're going to get both. You ingest the eggs that are capable of hatching. They pass into the intestinal tract, into the small intestine, and there they hatch. And now they're in the larval stage. So if you can imagine these tiny little larvae hanging out in your small intestine.
Is that where you get the tummy upset?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, in general.
Stuff moving around
Stuff
in
moving
there.
around, not feeling too good. It's probably pretty small. You're pretty much you're fairly asymptomatic right now
Okay.
in just the larval stage. And then what happens is they kind of burrow into the intestinal lining, find a portal of entry, like the portal vein system. They hop in, take a ride through the venous tracts. Now they're in the bloodstream, and they make their way to the lungs, the alveoli. So they're hanging out there, and they hang out there for like 10 to 14 days. But this is where it gets, well, it's already disgusting.
Yeah, if you got worms in you, you're
It's
disgusting.
already gross. Well, they're just larvae. They're just baby worms right now.
Just babies.
They're just
Leave them
babies.
alone, they're just babies.
Yeah, I mean, you can't.
Little
it's
baby
all right.
worms.
So they hang out there for a bit with their friends. They become a little bit more mature. And then
They get their driver's license.
they start a journey. Their journey, basically, they crawl up the airway to the trachea, which is our breathing tube that comes from our bronchial tubes, the two main tubes that come from our lungs. They crawl up through there, make it up to the top of the trachea, and that stimulates a cough. So maybe you start coughing, and that's why you went to the doctor after a week or so when you thought you had a cold, but it didn't go away. And it's not like a super annoying cough all the time, but you'll cough a little bit and you cough, but you don't cough stuff up and out. Maybe you cough some of it out, but most of the time when you cough, you swallow. And then when you swallow, the larvae go right back down. And this time they go back down to the small intestine. And once they get back there from this initial journey that they took, now they can start to mature into a mommy or a daddy worm.
Right back around, huh?
Yeah,
Okay.
that part of the cycle doesn't make much sense to me, but who tries to understand nature is like, you're already there in the first place.
Why didn't you grow and mature? Maybe it needed air.
I don't know. I was actually reading that they don't know why it does that because it doesn't make sense. You're like, you're already there. Why don't you just stay there? But that's what they're like, well, maybe it's because when you're that small, the environment is very hard to stay in because the intestines, of course, are always contracting. So there's always fluid moving and there's not as much, there's not a lot of, they're not strong. So maybe they'll get swept away or maybe they have to go to the lungs and super oxygenate, or maybe they just need a break to give them that time to be stronger larvae. And then they can make their way up to the trachea and then get swallowed.
I don't know. Does anything in nature make sense?
No,
Why
no,
does
that really
why do
doesn't make any sense.
salmon swim upstream to go back and all that stuff? I mean, come on.
So they do that to get ripped.
They
Just
do.
to build muscle.
Oh.
Yeah.
I don't think that's true.
That is actually true.
No, it's not true.
All right. So after that, then now they're back in the small intestine. They're back in where all the food comes through, and they're hanging out, and they mature, and either it's going to become a male worm or a female worm. Maybe you'll have a bunch of them that mature.
Mm.
You know, maybe you're just riddled with worms.
And then they can make more.
Yeah. So here's the disgusting thing. The further disgusting thing. The female worm can hatch as many as 200,000 eggs a day.
Wow.
Now, if you only have a female worm in you, then that's fine. You're not going to have other worms because she's just going to hatch unfertilized. She's going to hatch eggs, but there's nothing there to fertilize it. So if you're lucky, maybe you only have a male worm or only a female worm. Maybe you only have one. That would be good because it doesn't matter. You're only going to have one.
I feel like one worm is way too many worms.
Well, I'm just saying, they can't be fertilized. They can't do
Okay.
self-fertilization. They can't fertilize an egg.
So, but what does it do while it's in there? Do you poop it out? Or like one worm, oh, no, I can poop it out, I'm good to go?
Well,
Or
you're going to
just-
eventually poop out the eggs because they're not getting fertilized. So you're just going to shit those out. They're not going to become larvae because
Okay,
they're
but
not
what
fertilized.
about the worm that's hanging out? What's he doing?
Let's just talk about the babies for
Okay, I
now.
don't want to. Okay, let's talk about the babies.
Or worst case scenario, you have a male and a female worm.
And then you're just fucked.
And then the female worm puts out 200,000 eggs a day, and the male worm puts out sperm. And unlike the humans or mammal or mammalian,
Reproductive
mammals,
cycle.
their sperm doesn't swim; it crawls. And I think what I'm going to do is I think I'll have to link a video to this where you can see the sperm crawling. It's very freaky, crawling
Ew.
towards the egg.
Ugh.
Yeah, it's great. It's just great. So of course then it reaches there, and then it's going to become fertilized, and of course then now you've got
Bunches of worms?
sure
Or
No,
more
larvae.
eggs?
yeah, larvae,
More
yeah.
larvae?
But most likely you're just going to shit that out
Okay.
because it has to be in the soil to become infectious.
Oh. Okay, so
Like,
you're
probably the original
you're gonna
stuff that you
you're
saw.
gonna pass it on to someone else.
Yes, the original stuff you swallowed is what you have to deal with.
Okay.
So now you've got these giant worms. I mean, relatively, any worm is a giant worm once it's inside your system, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. One worm's too many worms.
Yeah.
I feel like these worms should have died off a long time, except for the fact that you said it can live for 10 years in the egg stage. But it seems like if you have to go through all of that process just to get to where you are, that's a lot of process.
Well, to them, it's timeless. I mean, they're not really viable until they hit the soil,
Yeah.
and then you ingest them.
And then they go through you and through your trachea and back down into your
Yeah,
gut.
and then
I
it's
mean,
a-
that's a
I mean-
huge project.
Yeah, but it's never going to go away, right? Because people are just going to keep shitting that out into the soil.
So it all goes back to poop.
It all goes back to shit. So from ingestion to adult worm that is spitting out more eggs, that takes about 2 to 3 months. And an adult worm can live 1 to 2 years. But of course, you could be infected for years with the old dying off or whatever. So you could have them. There's cases where they think someone had one for like 10 years or some stuff like that. But of course,
How does it not get shit out? Like it attaches
it's
itself?
hanging out, man. It's alive.
Yeah, but so it's crawling back up as it's trying to go through.
No, it just lives in this. It's an adult worm that's like freaking 13 inches long. It's gonna be able to hang out in your small intestine.
But why wouldn't it just move through like a big old turd?
Because the small intestine there's no turds in the small
I know
intestine.
it's
It's all liquid.
Yeah, but why can't it just be pushed through?
Because if it's an adult worm by that stage, it can resist the peristaltic movement of the
That's
small
what
intestine.
I'm saying. So it's swimming upstream to stay.
No, it's just chilling.
Yep.
There's loops. Oh my God, do you not understand anatomy? There's loops in the small
yeah,
bowel.
so it's just hanging
It's
out
all
in
loops.
there and it's not
It
moving
can hang
downward.
out in like the
Okay.
jejunum or the.
I'm gonna juju you.
Like,
No,
it's not
okay,
that-
I got it. All right, I got it.
With all the loops of bowel that we have in the
So
small
it's just
intestine,
hanging
it can
out.
just
It's not
kinda
going
hang out.
anywhere. Blech.
Yeah, why does it need to go anywhere?
I guess it doesn't.
It can. I mean, if it's gonna try, maybe it's got some sort of primitive drive to reproduce or something like that. If it's a single female worm, most of the female worm, most of the time when people have complications where they have to have surgery, apparently, like if it crawls up to the biliary tract or the pancreatic duct, I guess most of the time those are female worms.
They're looking for their friends, looking for a
Maybe
mate.
they're looking for a way to continue to drive on, I guess. Anyway, so after it dies, of course, or if you have a bunch of worms, you can shit them out. That's how people see worms in countries where there's high prevalence of worms. Apparently, it's not a big deal.
Like, oh, just like a big old.
Yeah, they can just have
it gets stuck, and you have to like pull it out.
Sure. I mean, why not? Probably won't get too stuck. I mean, once it's on its way out, if it's big enough to be on its way out, it's probably dead. If it's passing through the colon.
Yeah, but I mean, don't you think you've had to pull stuff out of the dog's ass before? Like, don't you think that worm like string will be like stuck there?
Yeah, but it's
just
not a
hanging there.
hookworm. It's not like it doesn't have teeth. It's not gonna like latch in and you can't pull it out. Even if you did say you could pull it out.
I don't want to pull it out. If that was coming out, I'd freak the fuck out.
Right. Well,
Tyler, do you have worms?
No, not to my knowledge.
That's the thing.
I mean, if I do, I don't want to know. Like, if they find it, like, it sounds like so far, at least, it doesn't sound like a bad thing.
He's like, sign me up. Give me some worms.
Like,
well,
I'd rather not know.
I mean, I guess if you're in a country where it's endemic, they're so used to it that they're just walking around riddled with worms. But it still kills up an estimated 60,000 people a year. And so you have to assume that most of those are children because they die of malnutrition or, they just can't absorb food and they just die.
Aww.
And they don't get treatment.
That's kind of sad. Maybe that's partly why they have like the bloated bellies because they're malnourished because of their worms.
Well, I mean,
and malnourished. But
yeah, so if I can find a really good picture for you guys and share. Here's a section of the colon removed.
Wow.
Have the small intestine removed. And of course, I'll link these to the CDC site and Wikipedia. But you can see that this one's riddled with worms. So, of course, how would any food pass through that?
No, it can't.
It's not going to pass through that. It just can't. That would be some severe intestinal blockage. Here's the one that I find really interesting. If you do a barium swallow study on somebody, where you do an X-ray, and somebody swallows barium, which really just lights up on an X-ray. If the worms ingest it also, and of course it's around, you can actually see the worms on the X-ray.
Ew.
Wow.
Which is fascinating to me because now I'm like, wow, worms should really be part of my differential now when I talk to people. Like, my tummy hurts.
That probably, if that's many people have it, that seems like more common than some other crazy stuff that people think they have when they Google what they think is wrong with them.
Well, when I first started practicing, I can remember wanting to test for H. pylori on people.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't remember who it was I was with, but they told me they're like, oh, nobody has H. pylori.
I feel like lots of people
But
do.
now the statistic is like, it's like 1 in 7 people or something. I don't know. Don't quote me, obviously, but the stats are really high on how many people have Helicobacter pylori. And a lot of them are children running around with H. pylori.
Why do you think that? It's because our diet sucks so bad?
No, it's just a common thing. And we don't test for it and we don't treat it. But if you test for it, then, you find it, knock it out.
Okay.
And if you don't test for it, you don't treat it, then they've found links to, I think, gastrointestinal cancer or stomach cancer with untreated pylori for years and years and years.
Okay.
All right. So the worm can migrate from the small intestine, and this can cause serious issues. Like I said, it can travel to the liver, the lungs, or the brain. Can you imagine if the brain was just riddled with freaking Ascaris, worms? You can actually have them so much that they can come out of your nose. You can expectorate them. That would be freaking pretty disgusting.
I wish I remembered, but when we were in nursing school, when I took anatomy and physiology, the one lady that we dissected, it was a cadaver lab, and she had worms in her brain. But I don't remember what kind of worms it was. They thought she had like Alzheimer's or something, and they just kept treating her for Alzheimer's, and they found out that she had worms in her brain.
Like, why didn't they do an MRI of her brain?
I have no idea. I don't know. Maybe she didn't want it. I don't know.
I don't know because I refer people to neurology for Alzheimer's. So one assumes that they probably do some sort of imaging now more commonly than they
Yeah,
ever
then they
did.
did like 30 years ago,
Yeah.
25, 28 years ago. And I don't know whenever I took that class. But yeah, she had worms in her brain. It was so gross.
Well, the good
And
thing
sad.
is, if the worms are not quite that bad, or you assume they're not that bad, um, then you just get an oral dose of an anti-worm medication. That's it. One dose.
Like a dog, a dewormer.
Well,
We're going to deworm you.
No, literally, you just get one dose of it, like albendazole.
I feel like that's what they do with dogs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, ivermectin, you give that to dogs too. So the common ones we use are albendazole, mebendazole, or ivermectin. It's a different treatment for someone who's pregnant. So here's the gross part. Here's what I found was the most gross. So apparently, the whole pulmonary manifestations are more common with people who are not in areas that are endemic to that particular infection. So, like, somebody here goes and they travel and they get infected, they come back here, they're more likely to have the pulmonary symptoms.
Okay.
Whereas in a regular place, they're not, and they would just, they're just going to be riddled with worms and they're shitting them out.
I wonder why.
It's probably, I mean, due to like just the difference in society and the fact that I'm assuming at some point, genetics has to come into play where you're more resistant to it than in other cultures. Like how you have to get shots for different diseases if you're traveling out of the country type deal.
Yeah. Yeah,
Is
and even if
what
they
I
have,
think
and
it
even
would
if they
be.
have the complaint, it might not be reported like it is here.
Yeah, I was going to say, or they just didn't check their lungs because they're past that
No,
lung
they just
stage.
don't go see a doctor.
Yeah, they're
so
past
there's
that stage.
they don't see a doctor, so they're not complaining about a cough in the first place.
Okay.
I think a lot of it is reporting. They can sit there and say, "Oh, this doesn't seem as be as prevalent in these countries." It's not as prevalent because people don't go to the doctor. They don't have doctors to go to.
They don't go to the doctor unless they're super, super sick or the doctor is available for them.
It's just like Alzheimer's, how they're trying to say that Alzheimer's is more prevalent now than it was, blah, blah, blah. Like, one, it wasn't even a diagnosed condition. Two, people who had, not Alzheimer's, what do you call it? Autism. It wasn't a diagnosable condition. And if you had autism, they just thought there was something wrong with you. Then maybe they called you the R word, or maybe they just beat the shit out of you. So autism's clearly always been around. Everything's always been around. There's nothing brand new except new organisms from us pushing into the woods and the jungle. Even when we say something is new, like monkeypox, oh, it's not new. Monkeypox has been around thousands of years, I'm sure. I mean, come on. Everything's older than us. All right. So unfortunately, even if it's suspected during the pulmonary phase, let's say that I suspect somebody's got worms during the pulmonary phase when they're coughing. You don't treat them with worm meds. To me, that would suck because I'd be like, okay, so I've decided that you have worms, but you're in the pulmonary phase, so
because they would die in your lungs. Then you got to let them pass that stage.
yeah,
What?
yeah. If they die in your lung area, then they can cause you to have an inflammatory pneumonitis, and which you would have to treat with steroids and apparently I'm sure they could probably like crystallize and make you have like big old infiltrates and basically get pneumonia from that. And I don't know how you're gonna get that out of there. So basically you just gotta let it work its way out.
You come back in 6 months and we'll treat your worms.
It's 2 months. It's apparently it's 2 months, and then you treat the worms. And then of course,
Yeah, but could you imagine knowing that you had fucking worms and like, hey, we can't do nothing about it. Just deal with those worms for the next 2 months. Come on back. I'd definitely be making that follow-up appointment.
well, if the
sure.
yeah, but if the pulmonary complaints are rolling around for like 5 to 10 days, most of the people are not going to go to the doctor in the first place.
So you don't even know you have it in your
You probably don't even know you have it.
Okay.
So I can't imagine that there's too many times where people are like immediately like, oh, this person's got worms. Let's do a sputum sample. So that's probably not going to happen.
Okay.
But I look at it the gross way of saying, like you're saying, like, oh man, if you knew for 2 months that you have worms, but they're not going to treat it because they got to wait for the inflammatory phase in your lungs to go down and for you to be done with the lung phase.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I'd be freaking the fuck out. Like, dude, I can't sleep because I got fucking worms. What if I lay down and they like climb out? Like,
well,
no,
good.
That's okay. Well, yeah, but that's still nasty.
Well, I mean, but they climb out, then you don't have to deal with them anymore.
I don't want them at all.
Well, not only that, but I also read in Medscape that they also said that in the larval stage, they don't know how effective it is in the larval stage. So it might not actually kill everything either. But in the same Medscape article, it also said, "Oh, this is why you don't do it because it could cause inflammatory or infectious pneumonitis." So I'm like, "Well, make up your mind. Which is it?" I'm still like, "Yeah, I know that's what the evidence says, but I'm kind of like,
I'm like, can I have my medicine anyway, and then treat me again in 3 months or whatever? Yeah,
I just don't think you would see anybody in that acute pulmonary phase. Honestly.
Okay, well, I
And
don't.
it wouldn't be part of your differential. You wouldn't be like automatically like, "Oh, this person has worms."
I'm like Skylar. I don't want to know. Then don't tell me about my worms.
Yeah,
It's just-
I don't think that there's any benefit in me really knowing. And
Hey,
even
so
if they
we're
found
gonna
out,
tell
like,
you right now, as a child, you had worms.
well, I did go to the emergency room for blockage. It could have been worms back then.
It wasn't blockage. You just
The
needed to poop.
blockage.
It wasn't blockage. You just needed to
Yeah,
poop.
what would you call that?
It's not a
What would you call
blockage.
that?
Constipation?
Yeah, it's called constipation. It's not called blockage.
Yeah,
Blockage means that it's blocked off.
constipation.
No.
Yeah, constipation is a blockage.
No, it can still
There's
come
something
out.
Because it
that's
can still go.
blocked.
No, it can still go through.
Well, maybe I eventually cleared the worms out, and that cleared the blockage. We didn't get anything definitive.
Lots of little kids have worms. Pinworms.
Yes.
This is just the more resilient type of worm that we're talking about. So anyway, so basically you would have to retreat that person. You know, you would treat them and then they're going to shit out some worms, hopefully. And then you would still have to check them again in like 3 months. Yay.
Yay.
Double check their poop.
I'm gonna use the code word. Oaxaca? What is it?
Oaxaca.
Oaxaca? How is this fucking funny? This isn't funny. This is awful.
It's gross factor.
This is not funny at all.
As
Make
I
it
said,
funny.
This is my segment for me to decide, is this something that people would be interested in the future? And I think
I
people
feel
would
like
be.
they're gonna be scarred for life.
Well, the good thing is that they do mass treatment. The World Health Organization gives medications out for free in endemic areas. But of course, if that stuff lasts for 10 years and you still keep shitting in the soil and they still keep, getting it over and over again, I don't think that it's actually going to ever go away.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
pretty gross. How do you get it to go away? Ooh, yeah.
How do you get it to go away? Well,
Yeah,
I don't
I
think
mean,
you do.
You don't. You're just gonna have to wash your hands.
Is this not again
Wash
how
your
the
fruit.
human race will not be around forever because there are the simplest life forms clearly are more resilient than we are.
And it all goes back to poop. Poop is gonna kill us, folks. Poop is gonna kill us.
Here's some really
Definitely
good
poop.
pictures of Ascariasis lumbricoides retrieved from the causing acute pancreatitis, removed. Oh yeah, all kinds of fun stuff that I'll have to link on this podcast episode. So what's not funny about that?
It's nasty. I don't think
It could happen to you.
Yeah, I don't think it's funny when. Yeah, I don't want worms.
Well, right about now, Ron would be saying it's not possible for him to get them in the first place, so he would not
That's
fear it.
Probably true. He's not gonna fear it. So we should let him wallow around in dirt. Ron's challenge,
Ron's challenge: wallow around in dirt and put your hands in your mouth.
and maybe play with some poo.
Yeah. Well, does make you wonder though, if 1.2 billion, if they estimate 1.2 billion people are infected, how many people do you know have
Yeah,
worms?
I was gonna say if you have like a room full of people, you're like 1, 2. How many out of a group of 100 does that mean then?
I don't know how many billions of people are in the world. Like 15
Mm.
billion?
The World Health Organization says we'll hit 8 billion in November.
So I mean 2 out of 10 have fucking worms.
That's pretty crazy.
Like 1, 2, oh, not it. So in a room of 5 people, 1 person has worms.
So if you take like a huge area or a huge
mean-
population like India, you go to India, you can imagine that probably a lot of them have worms.
Yeah.
I'm just going to start treating my people that go to India for like, all right, 2 months from now, we're going to hit you with a worm medicine.
We're gonna deworm you.
It's going to deworm you.
Delouse you, deworm you,
Well, that's the
whatever.
crappy thing about it. That you're like, why don't we just give them worm medicine right when they get back?
and then
But if it
kill
doesn't, but if it doesn't work against the eggs and it doesn't work against the larvae, you're like, shit. That means you actually do have to wait. You just have to wait.
Just wait it out.
You have to wait it out until their stomach hurts, and then you check their shit.
So
Yeah, but I feel like
basically,
medicine's not like, well, I mean, I don't know that many people are thinking that ahead to be preventative about worms.
Well,
I'll be
I
honest
was
with you.
thinking for that, like maybe you're like, I'm gonna travel out of the country to a place, and then you preventatively order them like a stool check, a poop check, 3 months later, just to make sure.
Sure, I would say if you're in primary care, why not?
Yeah.
It's probably a good idea. But that's why I think that's what really bothers me is with travel medicine, is people don't realize that travel medicine is a specialty. So they'll just call you and be like, oh, hey, I'm going to go to this country. What do I need to do? And I'm like, how the fuck would I know?
I need all my shots. Like, how do you know? Like, you're supposed to know every country what you're supposed to order for them.
Well, what's really, what's kind of obnoxious about it is if I was going to go to another country, I would check the CDC site has travel information for every country that we travel to. So you literally go on there and you click on that country and it tells you what shots are recommended, if you should bring medication with you, all those things. And that's what you're supposed to have done. You're not supposed to call your doctor and be like, hey, I'm going to go to Budapest. What do I need to have? I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah,
Maybe
but
you should have done some footwork yourself first when I have
yeah,
7 minutes.
but
When I have 7 minutes to talk to you.
well, the problem with that is just that the CDC website is just covered in lies, so it's hard to determine what is real and what is fake on there.
Well, the travel recommendations are good because they're getting that from each country, and they track that from an epidemiological standpoint. And
Yeah,
most of
but
the
I don't know.
time,
You can't really trust them. They did invent this fake pandemic, so I
yeah,
don't really know how viable their travel recommendations are.
right, yes. No, I think that I tell people to call the health department. I'm like, one, start doing some footwork on your own. You can't expect us to know everything off the top of our heads. Travel health is a specialty.
I feel like the health department should know because
The health department
that's
does know.
I mean, that's what I'm saying. They know because that's their specialty. They're the ones who give vaccines and all that stuff.
Yeah.
More than anybody else, not more than your primary care that gives flu shots.
Well, and some health departments have travel health providers or travel health nurses. But no, they want you to know everything. I'm like, I don't know that. I had one recently that was going to Nigeria and called me and they're like, hey, I'm going to Nigeria. What do I need to know? Like, did you check the CDC site? No. I'm like, do you have time? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, okay, because this is going to take a while because I'm going to tell you exactly what I'm going to do. And to me, it doesn't make me sound stupid at all. I'm like, I'm going to check the CDC site, see what area of Nigeria you're going to, see what you're recommended that you have, what vaccinations you're supposed to have, what medication it recommends I send you with. It just takes time, but that's not something you have time to do in primary care. I'm just lucky that I am doing a job where I have time. Most of the time, your provider has 3 minutes.
Yeah.
3 to 7 minutes total to figure that out for you, which is they're not going to figure it out. They're going to say, go to the health department. And you just wasted your time.
Do you think that people think about this before they travel? No, they don't. Because it makes you think, do you really want to go to some of those countries that have all these crazy nastiness that you can come home with?
No, because even if you're thinking about going somewhere that's not that far away, you're like, crap, now I got to deal with Zika. I got to deal with yellow fever. I got to deal with malaria. I got to deal with all these different things. You're like, man, I don't even want to leave the United States now. And there's states in the United States you don't want to go to. Oh, I could get Lyme disease. I could get Rocky Mountain spotted fever. I could get Eastern equine encephalitis.
Yeah, see? Okay, this is depressing.
No, it's hilarious.
I can't even, I don't even know what word you're on. What?
It's Oaxaca.
Oh, there we go.
Where's Oaxaca? Well, fine.
Okay.
Fine. Oaxaca then. Hey there, members of the Great Slaptail Nation. It's me, the Beaveman, and I'm here to deliver you a message from beyond the stars about our sponsor for this episode, Swiss Navy. No matter who you love or how you love, Swiss Navy products set the bar for sexual enhancement. There's more glide, more comfort, and even products for longer-lasting pleasure. Swiss Navy has a wide range of premium products to choose from for whatever amount fills your hole, if you know what I mean. My favorite product is Swiss Navy's silicone lube. Get it, use it, love it, and never be dry again. Once again, that's Swiss Navy at SwissNavy.com. And in your order comments, let them know the Slaptail Squad sent you. Swiss Navy, no matter who you love or how you love. Adios, mooch fuckos. Anyway, so sorry that's just not funny enough. You know why it's
That
not
makes
funny?
me feel so much better, though. Worms and lube. I mean, that lightens it up so much.
Well, worms create their own type of lubrication generally. They're very mucousy. Anyway, well, sorry you don't find that funny. You know what would make it funnier? The reason why it's not funny, do you know why it's not funny?
It's because the swan is not funny.
No, it's because my guests today and the squad member are very highly intelligent and don't ask stupid questions.
Oh, well, that was a
Sure.
that was a backhanded compliment. So we'll take it.
So, in other words, this is for the testing phase of my listening audience. Then, should I decide that this will be the new podcast, as it's the new podcast for the Slaptail Nation network, then I would have to always have a guest on that asks stupid questions.
Ron's. Fuck. If Ron's was here, we'd be all set.
No, I didn't say Ron's. I just said a question, a guest that will
Okay.
always ask stupid questions.
Well,
And ones that will get easily grossed out when I share my screen with them.
definitely the Tremonde on that one.
Yeah, it would have. Tremonti would have.
like
He would have
vomited.
Yeah, he probably would have thrown up. Honestly.
Yeah.
Well, does anybody have any questions about the worms before we wrap up this great podcast that has touched on this wonderful, wonderful subject of worms?
Why? Why did you pick worms?
Well,
Why not worms?
Why not?
So, okay, if the eggs can live for 10 years in the dirt and through whatever obviously hot and cold and environment dirt
Not
is
really
in.
cold.
Not really cold?
Not really
Okay,
cold.
so if it froze, worms are dead.
No, I didn't say that. I'm just saying that it's
They
more
just
common.
go
in,
dormant.
More common in tropical
Okay.
subtropical.
Note to self, tropical areas. Now, how long can the
warm.
worms live outside the body? Like if you
The
actually
worm itself outside the body. I didn't read anything on that, but I don't think it can live outside the body.
So
It's not hanging out alive.
Okay. Because it would be kind of cool to see them like wriggling around. I guess you could see that if you had that blocked up colon.
Well,
cut
when they
open.
pull it out, yeah. I did see something though that apparently they don't like anesthetic, and so they've had worms come out of people's mouth when they put them under, when they the breathing, when you have to breathe in the anesthetic, and the worms just kind of came out.
That's nasty.
That is pretty crazy.
Yeah, that's gross.
Like they don't like anesthesia.
They can't sedate my worms.
That would be an interesting story though. If you knew anesthesiologist and you're like, hey, how many times have worms come out when you've put a mask on somebody to anesthetize them?
Ugh.
I should look that and see.
I
if
wonder
there's any
if
stories
it's the lung worms, like the larva, whatever in the lungs, like when in that phase, or the worms come how do they come out from the intestinal tract out?
No, I'm sure this is not that type of worm. I don't think it's.
different worms.
I'm sure it's different types of worms because worms infiltrate all. There's so many different types that infiltrate everywhere that are parasitic. This one is kind of. I don't think that it would all of a sudden you breathe in anesthesia and it's going to make the long trek from the small colon
I wasn't
all the way back up.
In the colon part. I meant in like the lung phase part, like the larva before it became the worm.
My guess is you can't really see those too well.
Oh, okay.
I'm assuming they're pretty small.
Yeah. We don't want to see our worms. Don't tell us about them. If you see our worms, don't tell us.
Members of the Great
ignorance is
Slaptail.
bliss.
Yeah. Members of the Great
Just
Slaptail
tell us
Nation.
it's a Flintstones vitamin 2 months later.
Members of the Great Slaptail Nation, if you've expectorated worms,
Please let us know.
please let us know and tell us how big they were.
Expectorated. That means coughed them
If
up.
you've coughed them up, sorry. I tried not to be too technical on this episode.
You did pretty good. You explained it well. But expectorated, I mean, that's a pretty big word.
Sorry.
If you're coughing out worms or even shitting them out, we kind of want to know about it. Let us know. Let us know about your worms.
Yeah, and you can find some really good videos
Just
out there.
don't send them to us.
There's some really comical, informational, educational videos out there where I saw one where they were talking about how do you diagnose this, and it was like by getting a fresh sample of feces, and they had a little pile of feces with a little smile on it. I was like, that's hilarious.
The poop emoji. Like
Little
making it
smiling
sound good.
poop. Let's make
Let's
it
be
pleasant.
clear. Please only send said videos to the normal recurring characters of the Slaptail Nation, please do not reach out to me and send me any videos of worm poop. I don't need that in my life. I would just prefer if we could keep that a Beaveman thing. So I don't need to see poop worm by proxy.
Well, you know, the actual symbol, the actual medical symbol, you know how it's supposed to be two snakes on a staff?
That's
Okay.
probably
Uh-huh.
why. Yeah.
That's actually, they suspect that that's actually, what is it, the guinea worm?
I don't know.
That's because that symbol's old as fuck. And that's how you got those worms out. You wrapped it around a stick and you just kept slowly pulling it out.
Ew. That's disgusting.
I cannot confirm that that's actually why the symbol was drawn that way.
I mean, the only worm I want is a tapeworm.
Those can get pretty long.
Yeah, and then it'll be great for weight loss. And then they give you some worm medicine. You can just poop it out, and you're on your way, all buff.
Yep.
That's a secret diet pill. It's like take one a day for 5 days, and one of those pills has a worm in it. You're all good.
Yeah, it's a mutually beneficial relationship.
Yeah.
It's a symbiotic relationship there.
Yeah. And then at the end, when you've lost enough weight, you just take another pill, and out goes the worm.
Yeah, but it's not fair to the worm.
I mean, he had a good life.
Yeah, there's a whole movie and book about the tapeworm where the guy like doesn't even know he has a tapeworm, and then after he kills himself, he has to. The worm can't survive anymore. So you're just building up this tragedy for this worm just to look a little better.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like the worm would be okay with it as long as it had a good life.
No, I mean, if it had the potential to live a really long time.
I
You
mean,
just ended it. That's what you call murder-suicide.
yeah,
Harsh.
harsh.
It's harsh. All right. Well, I think that we did a good job. And so, members of the Great Slaptail Nation, if you are interested in the Beaveman starting a new podcast, and it's going to be called something like Sickness, Definitely, Death, Possibly, something like that, and you would like it to be an either an episode or a frequent installment for the Slaptail Squad or the Slaptail Nation, please let me know. Email us at slaptailsquad@gmail.com. You can reach us on Instagram, Facebook. You just got to look for the Slaptail Squad. You'll find us that way. And of course, listen to us everywhere you listen to podcasts like Apple Podcasts. And you can also find our link in the Slaptail Squad.buzzsprout.com. And shout out, because Ron's isn't here, shout out to our friend JD Hutchins of the Monsters Lair. I just listened to his podcast this week on the Puckwudgie. Very good. He mentioned the squad on his podcast. So thanks for mentioning us and for providing me with a new soundbite that I will get uploaded and will be using on future podcasts.
It was pretty funny.
It was pretty funny. And that's it from me, the Beaveman. I would like to thank friend of the show, Skylar, for joining us and not throwing up, although it would have been funnier had he done so.
I feel
And
like he
of
had
course-
some gross looks every once in a while. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you for enlightening me on yeah, I just again, I don't want to know if something's going on in there. Sometimes it's just better not to know, but thank you for at least making me aware of this potential problem.
And there's a
this
treatment.
epidemic.
There's a treatment, though. Just keep that in mind. There is a treatment.
We'll just tell you it's candy.
I kind of feel like everybody should start doing the freaking anti-helminthic every 3 months like the dogs do.
Yeah.
Well, some
Dewormer.
dogs get treated better than people.
I feel like that's actually the case.
True. That is true.
And they deserve it, by gosh.
They do.
They
Well,
do.
All right. Well, that's it for me, the Beaveman, saying adios. Much fuckos.
Bye from the swan.
Goodbye.